What weighed on me more was the fact that I created this. Nobody in my life was pressuring me to go out and try my hand at a venture like this, so it's almost this beast that you've created that that you have to feed now.
Yeah.
And who knows, I mean, at least at that point, and my faith in real estate and in the process and really in the coaches that I have been exposed to was never not there. I think my belief was always pretty solid. It was just that question of whether I was going to be the one that that wouldn't be able to produce results. So
yeah, I see this working for everybody else. I'm hearing all the success. Do I deserve this? Maybe I can't do it in my market. Maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe not. I don't have the right things. All these things. You're not the only one. And I feel like our listeners right now are relating to you so much because we all have these feelings. Like they creep up even when we are doing well. So
yes,
love that you're sharing this. I appreciate your vulnerability here.
Well, yeah, I mean, I will say I even had to take breaks from Wholesaling Inc. every once in a while. You'd try your hand and things wouldn't go your way, and you'd get close to a deal and it would fall through. And hearing the next guy the next day on Wholesaling Inc. talking about how everything fell into place and it was magical was sometimes I'd have to take a week or two off and listen to a stand-up comedy or something. I don't know. But I would always come back. So and then one day you popped up. So and here we
that's
are.
why we do this. That's why we do this podcast is, you have no idea who you can encourage on the path with you as well. Let's get into the successes that you are having. I know you had reached out around April and told me about a deal you had going on, and then you now have a couple contracts. Talk to me about those deals. Talk to me about those contracts, what you had to do, what the hurdles you had to jump through to get those.
Yeah. So, well, first things first, after a lot of other trials and no success, you started popping up on the Wholesaling Inc. podcast. You came into another group that I'm a part of and spoke to us over there. And you were on the Wholesaling Inc. podcast. So all of a sudden Brent Bowers was here, and it was your podcast with Tracy Kroll, the Do or Die podcast. Yeah. And I literally just took a step back, started listening because land was pretty new. And the idea of not having to spend so much time evaluating houses, that clicked with me. And so I followed that podcast, all the links in that podcast, whether it's, your offer letter, the fax, the mailer, I've been using PropStream a little bit, all of the links that you provided in that podcast. I just put them together one by one as you said them, in that order. And I sent out about 1,000 letters. And embarrassingly enough, after that 1,000 letters, I decided to try and put out a postcard mailer somewhere else. I had already decided that man, I haven't seen anything. Nobody's
jumped to the next ship.
Nobody's really caught this. Is embarrassing. This is really embarrassing.
That's great. I'm glad you're sharing it. Like, don't be embarrassed.
This is how it went. So I was already on to another mailer, but I got an email. I had set up an email along with my fax and phone, and it was a guy. He didn't want my offer, but he was close. He said, let's talk. And so we started talking, and it was 2 40-acre parcels up in Whatcom County, so up north in Washington. And
were they away from where you currently live?
From where I am, not too far. I mean, about an hour and a half drive.
Love it. I see that, most of my students that do really well right out of the gate are about 2-hour radius of where they currently live. And that's where I kind of started as well back in 2015. And just for our listeners, anybody that's not familiar with it, I did a 12-week do or die episode with Tracy Kroll. This is Tom Kroll's sister, and walked her through a live podcast. I've never done anything like this before. And neither had she. So it was kind of intimidating, but we got her a deal on a live podcast. So she's gotten a few more. That actually buyer that bought that piece of land has already paid it off. So it's really cool. So if anybody wants to refer back to that, that was a do or die episode with Tracy Kroll, the 90-day do or die. So keep going, Daniel.
Yeah, man. Anybody who asks me how it ultimately happened, I point them right in that exact direction. So I started talking to this fellow about his property, and that kind of clicked. It was like, okay, once again, things are falling into place. And I thought, hey, maybe it'll be a good idea to check my PO box and see if it had been I think about 3 weeks that this letter had been sitting there, and there was a land. I know. It's
That's why we call them the LOL, because if you found it's been sitting there for 3 weeks, you laugh out loud. You know, the post office, the United States Postal Service, has a free service. They will email you with a scanned copy of what you have in there.
I know. Baby steps, Brent. Baby
steps. That's it.
So I get to my PO box, and there was a signed letter in there, and I called the guy up. Yeah. And so reverse real quick. That first deal, I actually did end up getting under contract. So the 80 acres in Whatcom County, Washington.
Okay.
We ended up going into a contract, but title issues came up on that one. So we're still in talks. It's kind of on the back burner, but there's some really interesting things going on between it's reservation land, and the reservation and the county don't really communicate very well. So things came up, and that fell through. But meanwhile, this letter that came back signed, I had called him up, and he signed it at the price that was on the letter, had really no concerns. It was just a little buffer piece of property that he had when he lived up there to keep his neighbors at a distance. And so it's this little buildable lot between two other houses, and $3,600. He signed the paperwork. Now there were some HOA dues and some back taxes, which is kind of why he was ready to give it up. And those ended up bumping my actual price up to, I think, about $5,400 after all was said and done. And I went up about so we put it out about 45 days, I think, was our contract and my due diligence period. Just because from my position, I'm a beginner, and I wanted as much time as possible to figure things out. And I think about at 30 days or maybe 20 days, I went up there and I put a sign up, a for sale sign on the property. And I had been trying to reach out to the neighbor. That was my first move, and just couldn't get a hold of him. But when I went up and put that sign up there, he called me back. Within 24 hours, I got a call from the neighbor saying, I want to buy it. I don't want anybody else, because there were builders in the neighborhood building down the street. And so, I mean, I knew, and he knew, because I was also reaching out to those guys. And, somebody was going to buy that and build up next to him, and he wanted to avoid that. And so,
that's so funny you say that, because when I first started out in the land business, and I've had people come to me, well, what about all the land? Like, do you really want to see it all get built on? If you're selling it to people, they're going to build on it. But I have a lot of people buy stuff from me, buy land for me, just to stop the building.
Exactly.
So they can leave it for the deer and the turkey and the wild animals to roam, or they want an acre between them and their neighbor. So Great point. I see that all the time. That's awesome.
Yeah. So he reached out to me pretty quick. And after our conversation, I told him he could, he was pretty serious. He was ready to pull the trigger. And so I told him he could go out and take my signs down. And I think he was pretty relieved. And so that a few weeks later, there we were closing on, a little, almost quarter acre buildable lot up. This was out of Cedro Woolley, Washington, up on your way to the other properties, and still about an hour and a half, 2 hours away, like you said. And we closed on it. I mean, that's the long and short of it. You know, he was a little nervous, and because he had never, you know, I assigned this contract. And so, you know, he, at a certain point, he said, so are you buying this and selling it at the same time? And I said, exactly. That's exactly what I'm doing. And, you know, I had a good title company behind me that kind of, you know, could explain things to him and you know, calm his nerves. And they definitely explained some things to me and helped me through the process. So,
and I like how you didn't try and explain the whole process. You just said, yeah, exactly. You know, you kept it simple. You were confident about it, and that instills confidence in him. Like, I feel like a lot of like people just starting out, they try and explain the entire process and they don't completely understand it. And then if you don't understand it and you're explaining it to someone else, they definitely don't understand it. And a confused mind makes no decisions and takes no action. So I like how you did that.